You're listening to Radio Cosmos.
All night long.
Bravo! My compliments, little lady.
Commercial!
Break for 30 seconds.
You are now listening to BaaD Radio.
Hello and welcome to BaaD Radio. BaaD stands for Business at a Distance. This is a show about local businesses and business networking. We are here in the News Radio WFLA Orlando studios from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. every Sunday. And I am your host, Angela Smarito. And I want to give a big shout out to Anna Smarito for the job she does on our YouTube channel. So if you go to BaaD Radio's YouTube channel, you can see all the previous episodes on the show there. She does an amazing job with that. And what's really great is that it lives in that space permanently. So we can always go back and reference other shows in the future. So I am very excited to announce our first guest, and this is someone who's become quickly near and dear to me. Please welcome Melanie Kayeleh to the show.
Thank you.
I know. It's so funny because it feels like it was so long ago that we started talking about this, but I mean, the way time goes, it's just crazy.
I think we just connected so quickly.
Yeah. So you live in the commercial real estate space, so that's correct, right? So it's going to feel funny because I'm going to ask you questions that I already know the answer to, and you're going to be like, Angela,
you already know this.
I know. So this is where, the audience is going to get to know who you are and a little bit about you. And honestly, that's the whole premise of the show is to be able to, for the audience to connect with you and know if they ever in need of your services and how to get in touch with you. So let's just start with your background a little bit. So where are you from? What brought you here? All that little history stuff.
In a nutshell, born in Brooklyn, moved a lot
I
growing
didn't even
up.
know that
Woo-hoo!
that you're a
Yes,
Brooklyn girl.
I definitely have the accent, but I tone it down.
Do you?
I can bring it up.
So when you go visit family or anything like that, does it come out like?
Or even local, if I meet somebody from Long Island or Brooklyn or Queens, it can come up,
Right.
definitely. Or every now and then a word will, pop out. So people say my folks have a very strong accent. I don't hear it at all, though.
Right. That's great. Okay.
So moved a lot growing up. Went to high school here in Orlando.
Oh, did you?
Then went to college and grad school away and came back about 1993. And here I am.
Right. I came here in 93 too, but I was from Melbourne. So I came here to go to UCF. So I graduated from UCF in like December of 95. So we probably got here about the same time.
Roughly, because I think I came around 93 or 94 back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we came here when I was at UCF. I met my husband, and it's, there's our history. So very cool. So I mean, I know a little bit about real estate. I know there's like there's residential and there's commercial, right?
Correct.
What are the two big differences between the two of them?
The difference is we do have the same license, but our job is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So a way I often explain it to someone who may not know is you can be a dermatologist and I'm an OB-GYN. We're both doctors, but someone wouldn't come to you to deliver a baby.
Correct.
Not to say per our license that we can't cross over, but you will find having that specialty definitely makes a difference. Mm-hmm. The tools we use are different. The language we use are different. The process is different. So it really is a very different job, but it wasn't my first job.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a perfect segue. What's your first job? No, go ahead.
So actually, I have a bachelor's in organizational communications and a master's in education human development with counseling.
Okay. So when you
was-
were doing that, what was your goal? Is it to be a teacher?
No, it was actually to be a licensed mental health counselor.
Okay.
So my original goal was to work in the drug and substance abuse realm, but just life led me to oncology in the medical field. So I
Right.
did that for about 8 or 10 years until I met my husband, decided to leave and just try other things.
So real estate medical, that's a pretty big jump there. So
Yes and no. I took a few years off. I got married late, had a child late, so I had the luxury to not have to work for a few years. But I think intellectually and personally, I'm a very social person. I really felt like when my daughter was a couple years old, I really wanted to go back to work. And my husband had a friend who was a commercial broker, and he knew me and said, hey, if she ever wants to get her license, she can come work with me. It probably took them a year to talk me into it. I got my license, and honestly, my very first meeting was like a counseling session.
Right.
And I was hooked.
Oh, that's amazing. What does getting the license look like? Is it like a whole lot of school, or I mean, how does that work?
Well, it's a good thing I remember this. You take 63 hours and a test. So it's 63 either online or in-class hours. You take a test there, and then you take a test by the state.
Is that something that like a state college does, or is there?
No. There's different real estate schools. Nowadays, you can take it online. You can take it in person. So there's a couple different ways you can take it. And then you sit for like a class test. If you pass that, you also have to get your fingerprints done with the state through the DBPR. And then you take a state exam through, like Pearson, one of the testing centers.
Okay.
And then you have to hang your license at a brokerage.
Okay, so I want to understand how this works with a brokerage. So, and is this the same? Like, we're going to talk through this, and I know this is for commercial, but does this apply for residential as well? I'm just trying to learn like how the process is, because
it's exactly the same.
Okay.
Except a couple things. Most commercial brokers are also not realtors. So that's a completely different subject.
Okay.
They're usually also residential folks typically call themselves real estate agents or realtors, but commercial people tend to call themselves commercial brokers.
Okay.
But they may not be the broker of the brokerage.
Okay.
So people in my industry, when we call and say, hey, it's Melanie, I'm a commercial broker with, Floridian Real Estate Group, there's really no confusion. There are times where people who are not in our industry may get confused because our lingo is a little bit different.
Okay. So you not graduate. So you get your license, and then you have to find, you said, a brokerage. What does that look like? So name some of the brokerages off that are out there, and like, what do? You start like resume sending?
For my industry, you have either independent brokerages, which is the first brokerage that I was with, where it's really just more of a boutique, few person type shop. You have some of the larger commercial brokerages, which I can advertise if you want. Like in my industry, it would be JLL, Cushman, Colliers, First Capital Property Group is more of a boutique brokerage. Right now, I'm with Floridian Real Estate. We're more independent. I work for some entrepreneurs, or I'm in-house with some entrepreneurs who have commercial real estate. So I have my regular traditional book of business, and then I also handle some of their stuff as well.
Do they have control over what you do?
It depends what brokerage you're with. For me, I am complete autonomy. It really depends. It's amazing. It's amazing. Which is why when I got into it, it really worked well for my lifestyle.
Well, so it sounds so flexible.
I mean, when I started, my daughter was in elementary school or just starting elementary school. So I would drop her off at school. I would exercise. I would work like 10 to 2, 10 to 3. And it was great because in commercial, oftentimes we're only really working, we don't typically work nights, weekends, and holidays. So it was perfect. As she's gotten older, as I've gotten more known, and as I've gotten busier, I've been able to just work as much or as little as I want because it's really flexible.
Right. But it's also something you do from home, right? You don't have to go to an office.
Right. I have an office, but I don't go.
Right. Because that's the flexibility. Because the way that I look at it is, if you can do your job, but you have a family, you take care of the family first. And if you have to stay up a little bit late one night, then so be it. But you have the flexibility. It's not like you have to be at an office from 9 to 5. And clock out for lunch and stuff like that.
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing for some of my colleagues and friends who are with the larger name brokerages, they go into office space because they also have that collaboration. So I get that collaboration just because of the nature that I'm a relationship person, and making sure that I keep that ability to collaborate in case I either need help with a transaction or I just need that social aspect so that I'm not, hibernating at home.
Right. Absolutely. No, I think that's fantastic. And so I know this sounds crazy, but it's already time to go to break. Can you believe that?
That was so fast.
I know.
That was so fast.
All right. Well, we're going to run to break, and when we get back, we'll have more with Melanie and BaaD Radio. So stay tuned.
Welcome back to BaaD Radio, brought to you by Premier Couple Superstore, because a couple that plays together stays together.
Ooh. Welcome back. This portion of BaaD Radio is brought to you by Premier Couple Superstore. October is here, and so is the cooler weather. So no better time to visit Premier Couples Superstore because they have got a huge selection of lingerie, shoes, toys, games, love oils, and a ton of great gifts. With Premier Couples Superstore, you don't pay those high prices because you go directly to the source. 5009 South OBT or shop online at premiercouples.net because a couple that plays together stays together.
Oh my God.
So much fun. I love that. Premier Couple Superstore has been a sponsor of the show since before I launched it. They're one of the first companies that I approached. And I had a relationship with the family, and they have been so supportive I'm launching, in January, it's going into my 4th year, and they've been on board with us since.
Do I get a discount being on the show?
Maybe. Well, we're here with Melanie Kayeleh, and she is, what does it say? Commercial real estate broker, right?
Exactly.
Okay, not agent, broker. And so before we went to break, we kind of were getting into the brokerages and how that relationship works. And so you said that in your space, so you have kind of the situation where you have some flexibility, but if you need to lean back on, you call it your brokerage?
Yes.
Correct. Okay. They'll come there and support you.
Yes, and most of us, which I don't know this firsthand, but from what I hear and see, commercial people, because those of us that do this full time, there's not a ton of us. I mean, there's a lot of us, but there's not as much as there are residential.
Right.
So we try to play nicely in the sandbox. If something were to happen and we go on vacation, I have colleagues that I may be working the other side of a deal with, and they'll pick up.
Oh, okay. Well, that's so nice.
Last year, my father passed, and I had colleagues that said, "Hey, don't worry about it. We'll do what we need to do." And so there's some great reciprocity and great working together, where sometimes I hear things are a little bit different on the other side.
Right.
I don't know about firsthand, but that's just kind of what.
But I mean, that's like that makes my heart happy to hear that there's actually people that are going to support one another and not, because I can tell you right now, like in this building, it's cutthroat. I worked here and this is with any like sales jobs that's in advertising and stuff like that. You have to hustle and you have to watch your back, because if you snooze, you lose. And there's no, here, you know what? I'm going to take 2 weeks off. Let me just watch your account.
Yeah, I think, but you raised a good point. I think those of us, we do hustle. It's a lot on relationship. I don't think, at least all of the colleagues that I know, I don't ever hear talk of people stealing other people's clients. It doesn't mean, let's talk about like a national brand. That doesn't mean that after a few years they may switch just for a different, take. But so there are times where we may switch properties, or you may, stop working with one brand and work with another. But I don't ever hear people in my industry stealing from one another.
Right. That's amazing. That's wonderful. I love to hear that.
I mean, it may happen. I just don't hear
not
it.
not in your world.
Not in my little circle.
That's awesome. So I know that you're a member of BNI, and we talk about BNI quite a lot. In fact, we've had the regional team on the show before. So in BNI, because when I think of commercial real estate, I think of big dollars. Has BNI really been beneficial for you?
Wow. Okay. You don't actually know this. So
no,
it's an interesting question that you should bring up. So let me just back up. When my friend asked me to come to BNI, my initial thought was it's going to be hard for me to make a morning meeting because my daughter was in school and drop off. And she said, "No, the meeting I'm taking you to is lunch." And I'm like, I'm all in. So I went, and at first business was great. I was happy. Life was good. And I am social, but I thought here was an opportunity for me to meet other people that I wouldn't normally come across. Certain attorneys, certain people in marketing, just not necessarily in my traditional sphere of influence. And my very first referral was Edward Jones.
Nice.
And I am still 7 years later the Central Florida broker for Edward Jones. So when you ask me, has it paid?
All you have to do is say Edward
Yes.
Jones.
So, yes. So, if you're looking at it from a residential versus commercial, how we get paid, yes, our dollars are probably much bigger than residential, but you have to keep in mind, it could take us a year or two to work for that, as opposed to a 30-day closing in residential.
Right. Well, let's talk about that particular situation. So you got that referral. Were they just looking for rental space? Like I want to walk. Can you walk me through that?
Yeah. So I work in the beginning of my career. I was really just doing tenant rep stuff, which means you have a tenant and you need an office, industrial, or retail space. I did a lot of restaurants in the beginning. So in this particular case, so this is a great example. There was an advisor who was awarded the opportunity to get an office space. And so I worked with corporate. So in this case, it's a little bit unique because the process is a little bit different. So I work with corporate to find that location for that agent.
So they give you the specs. They're like, it needs
Correct.
to be about 1,000 square feet.
Exactly.
This is what our budget is, and these are the areas.
This is the zip code I need for this particular agent. Go do your thing. Other clients don't necessarily, like all brands, national brands work somewhat similar, but not all exactly the same, which is why you have to understand the nuances of how each brand works. As time has gone on, so I really, even though I get and have a relationship with the agent I'm placing, my relationship and the strength of that is with the corporate team I work with, in Missouri for Edward Jones.
Okay.
I feel like I'm giving them free advertising.
That's all right. I wouldn't mind picking them up as a sponsor. So hello.
With other clients, it's really, so as my business and career has grown, I now work with landlords and sellers and tenants and buyers.
Okay. And how do you get those contacts other than B&I? Like, do you drive down the road and you see a sign that says for lease and you're like,
when I've done educational speaking, I say, don't do what I do, because I honestly, I don't want to say I don't know, but I really don't know. You're probably better asking my clients. I have been really lucky, and it's really because I'm about the relationship, not about the transaction.
I'm right there with you, girl.
And one of the very first things I learned, so a shout out to my first broker, is go into the transaction doing what's best for the client, which is kind of like a counseling session. Do what's best for them, and the money will follow. Do not go into a transaction, how much am I going to make? And that's very true. My understanding in residential, the first thing they ask is, what's the commission split? We don't do that in commercial. We go in, we hightail what we're supposed to do for the client, and then eventually, sometimes maybe even 6 months later, we're like, oh, what are we getting paid? So we're really focusing on what's best for the client, and I think that has helped. And by nature, I am a people person. I mean, you know me.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a people person. So I've been very, very lucky.
So do you stop when you see a for lease sign and find out what that story is all about, why that building's like for lease?
Wow, that's a good. A lot of times I already know.
Okay.
I pay attention. When I first started, I drove around a lot to the different areas, St. Cloud, Lake Nona, Lake Mary.
Do you have a region that you're allowed to work?
I can do the whole state of Florida. I primarily do Orange, Osceola, Seminole, Lake, Polk, Volusia County.
That's a big count.
That's
a big territory.
So is traditionally what I work, but I can go all over this,
It has to be Florida, though. So licenses are different in other states.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So do you collaborate with people out of state? Like, okay, so
I do.
Say a company wants to come in, so if you can get that referral, then you can find them space if they're moving to Florida.
Yes. So like one of my clients, which is a national brand, is located in South Carolina. I could help them. I just can't really step foot in the state, but I can help them. And there are legal ways where, yes, I can still get paid, but correct.
Right. Very cool. We're going to break again.
Again.
Wow. Again.
I want to just stay here forever.
I know. I love good shows. So, all right, we're going to go to break, and when we get back, we'll have more BaaD Radio, so stay tuned.
Welcome back to BaaD Radio, brought to you by Premier Couple Superstore, because a couple that plays together stays together.
Welcome back, and this portion of the show is brought to you by Body Street of Winter Park. Experience the future of fitness at Body Street in Winter Park. Lose weight, build muscle, tone your body in only 10 minutes or 20 minutes a week. Visit bodystreet.us, where fitness meets efficiency. Dang, 10 minutes would be a heck of a power workout. So we're here with Melanie Kayeleh, and she is a commercial real estate broker, and we've been talking about all sorts of stuff. But I mean, Body Street, have you heard of it before?
I haven't.
Okay, so BaaD Marketing just signed with us, so we're going to be doing their social media management, and it's technology from Germany, and so it's a place in Winter Park. There's one in Jupiter, and there's one in Winter Garden. And they use electromuscle stimulation for 20 minutes. Have you ever had an injury and they had to use a TENS unit?
Yes.
So it's that same technology. So it's 20 minutes, and they strap you in, and you put on the outfit, and so you have the things connected to you, and go through a series of motions with an instructor, and it pulses the through your muscles, and you get a full body workout in 20 minutes, and it's tough. Like when you're done, you're like, but you're done. Like you can only do it once a week.
Yeah.
So I've been going since November, and I've lost 40 pounds, but I've been doing other things.
Right.
But the whole thing is that I've been able to lose the fat and keep the muscle, because lots of times when people lose weight, they lose fat, but they lose their muscle too.
Correct.
So we don't want to do that. I still want to be able to pick things up. I don't want to be with all the loose skin and everything. So I'm gonna have to come be my guest sometime.
I would love to. That sounds fun.
It is actually really fun.
I may not like you afterwards, but or I may really love you afterwards.
It gives me, what is it called, endorphin rush, where you feel like, I just feel on top of the world when I'm done, and I always have a great day. So, like I said, I'm kind of addicted to it. So
that's awesome.
Not to mention, there's a really good thrift store. There's a Goodwill right next.
So
to it.
when he needs another location, that is what I would do.
I know. Trust me.
Exactly.
I've connected those two dots. So
that's exactly like you asked, how do I get clients?
Well, that brings up a whole world of franchise organizations. You know what I mean? Like if you get in with a certain franchise, because in BNI, there's a lot of companies that come there that are franchise holders, or I don't know what the right word is for it, and they
franchisees,
and so they, you know what I mean? They need places too.
Correct.
So that's
correct.
Now that I'm thinking about it, because
as I say, I rep, and I try to make this really clear, especially for people in BNI, is I do rep national brands, and that's great. It's great to say that you rep national brands, but I also rep regional and local and mom and pop, because as much as I love what I do and I love getting a new location for a national brand, I don't want to say I feel different, but it's a different feeling when you have a mom and pop who have a vision and you help them
I know.
through the process and get them to the end, and kind of sit back like, mama bear and go, hey, this was really cool.
Well,
I helped do that.
When the time comes for BaaD Marketing to get its own brick and mortar, you are my girl.
I am there.
Yeah. And I want a brick building.
Okay.
I want to turn it to Hogwarts, like my home.
Which is awesome, by the way. If you've never been, go to Angela's house. So.
I know. People say I should charge for people to come.
I know.
And it's so cute because people will always send me, you should go here. And it's Airbnbs that are decorated like Harry Potter. I'm like, have you been to my house? It's 10 times better than that Airbnb.
Email me, people. I have photos of her house.
So during break we were talking about what kind of sets you apart, and you've told me some fun stories. And you mentioned you've been really lucky, but I do think that your personality has had a lot to do with your success. So really, let's talk about some stories. Let's talk about something that you've done that was kind of funny. You did tell me one story about a coin laundry place.
So I have a client. Actually, this is interesting to back up because the story. I don't know if you know the pre-part of it. Is I was the listing broker on a transaction, and the client who was purchasing it was a broker himself, but he's also well known in the region and in the United States for owning a lot of laundries.
Okay.
We hit it off, and he said, you know what? I'll also let you kind of handle the whole transaction, and we just kind of bonded.
Okay.
So after the transaction was over, he said that he was going to fire himself because he is a broker, and he was going to let me.
I want to fire myself. That's pretty good.
He was going to handle his, his business stuff with laundry. I'll kind of handle his real estate. So recently, some of it he owns, some of it he leases, and for the last year, we've been waiting for a local establishment to vacate.
Mm-hmm.
And we know kind of what's going on. I can't obviously say yet, but we know what's going on. And he called me one day and he said, hey, could you do me a favor? Could you go peek in and get me some video so I see like what the store looks like and things like that? And I immediately said, yes, he doesn't live locally. And I said, yeah, not a problem. And after I hung up the phone, I thought, oh, I'm normally dressed pretty casually. And this day I was dressed casually, but I had a little bit more bling on than I probably should have to go to this location. So I buttoned up my shirt. I turned my, I get to the location, I go in, and I kind of just had my phone on video so that I could circulate.
So you weren't being obvious that
Correct.
You were a case in the joint.
Correct. And he asked me, what are you going to say if someone stops you? And I said, I would just say that I've got some King comforters. I can't fit them in my washing machine. I just needed a local laundromat to help me. I got there. Luckily, nobody was really there. I went in. I did my thing. I left. And so I called him, sent him the video, which he called me laughing, going, he couldn't believe I did that. And then I called the listing broker, who I'm dear friends with and consider him a very strong colleague of mine. And he could not believe that I went there on my own and didn't bring. So we kind of are still laughing about that.
Well, that sounds like you absolutely so put yourself in danger, for that video. But I get it. In radio sales, I've been in situations where I was like, okay, I'm going to get this check. If I'm not back in 20 minutes, send the police.
Well, I find, most times, and I know all agents, when you're going someplace, you need to be really careful because I do go to a lot of vacant buildings, especially in industrial.
And that's scary because of squatters and things like that.
But most times, the person where I know you hear stories on the residential side, most times I'm going to a building with somebody that I know. Very rarely.
I wouldn't recommend you going anywhere without somebody with you.
But most times I am either going or meeting somebody I know. So it's very rare that I'm meeting a stranger, so to speak, because the nature of commercial, you're together for a long time. The transaction takes a long time. So like I said, it's very rare that I'm going somewhere on my own or to a place that I'm not familiar with or without somebody that I know.
So I have a question about like property management companies and people. And so like a lot of times people don't buy their shop front, right? They have to lease it.
Right. So in office, industrial, and in retail, you can lease or you can purchase. So let's say you've got a public shopping center and you want to open up whatever it is, an ice cream store, a dry cleaner, whatever it is. You call the listing broker for
public?
The landlord. Well, for that shopping center, whether depending on who owns it. So there's usually a broker representing them, and you say, "Hey, I've got this concept. Would like to know if it's an allowable use in your center, whether it's a 100,000 square foot center, whether it's a mall, or whether it's just a 10,000 square foot."
So depending on what your like Premier Couple Superstore is not going to be getting a space next to a Publix, I'm guessing.
You are correct. So there are certain actually,
they have
and
their own
they're
building,
but
so they don't
actually
need to.
This is a funny story. I don't remember exactly, but I think I've met one of them. They actually fall into their own zoning classification. I actually think they are considered retail.
Yeah.
But there's also they're also considered a lingerie store, if I'm not mistaken.
They do have a whole section
They
of
do.
lingerie.
But you are correct. You will never find a Publix that has a tattoo studio.
They all have smoke shops, though. There's more smoke shops going down 434 than there's anything else. My husband and I counted like 12 just in one strip.
And that's a real, that's really hard on the tenant side. If a smoke shop, a cannabis dispensary, a Premier, something like that calls, not all landlords will accept that use.
Hold on. I want to talk more about this when we get back, but the music means we're going to break. So everybody stay tuned. We'll have more BaaD Radio coming up.
Welcome back to BaaD Radio, brought to you by Premier Couple Superstore, because a couple that plays together stays together.
Well, welcome back, and this portion of the show is brought to you by Ground Up Property Services. Do you know what your sprinkler system did last night? Probably not. So now's a good time to call or get your irrigation system serviced by Ground Up Property Services. And be sure to ask Rick Hall about a water sensor, too, because you don't want your lawn to get too much water. For lawn care, call 407-468-4295 or visit groundupinc.net. And that's for irrigation. That's not for like mowing your lawn and things like that. All right. we're here with Melanie, and we've been having a great time.
I'm having too much fun.
I know. So we're gonna pick up where we left off. And so you're a commercial real estate broker, and we started talking about storefronts and all that other stuff. And so I really want to have the audience have a full idea of like the scope of what your job is and what you do to help your client. So I know that's a very broad question,
right,
but do your best.
So if you're working with a tenant, whether that's medical, a restaurant, dry retail, whatever that is, you're looking for a space that they can essentially set up to be successful.
Okay.
If you're a good broker and not right.
And do you look all around? And
it depends. Okay. Sometimes they have a certain geographical area that they prefer or need to be in, and it's your job to educate why or why not that may or may not work. Mm-hmm. An example is industrial space. We're very low on vacancies. There's certain parts of town where we have very little, and so we might have to say, listen, we may have to look at other areas.
And things are zoned for certain places. Because one time I had a tax guy, and he moved into, when you say industrial, but it was a space that it was meant for big trucks to back into and like load in, but he was like, so he just set it up as an office.
Yes,
is that allowed?
We do have zoning and allowable uses in commercial. Just because a use is allowed doesn't mean that a landlord has to approve it. As an example, we were talking before about smoke shops. Just because there's a vacancy, a landlord doesn't have to, if he doesn't want your use, he doesn't have to take your, the other thing too is you have to also be financially viable, mm-hmm. which is we could talk about that on another show.
I know, right? So you have to do the whole credit check, and all that other stuff.
Correct. So that's kind of if I'm helping a tenant. If I'm helping a buyer, it's understanding what the need is. Are we looking for industrial? I'm considered a generalist, so I cover retail, office, industrial, and land development. Some of my colleagues are specialists, where they're just handling the one. Mm-hmm. And then if I'm working with a buyer, making sure in commercial, we can talk about lending probably at another time too, but you don't really get pre-approved in commercial like you do in residential. It's based on the property or the income that's going to be produced from the property.
Really?
So we kind of have to go into it. I wouldn't say blindly. I mean, obviously we're doing our work and our homework. So we're looking for either that building or
wait. So if I were to take BaaD marketing and I want to put it in a brick and mortar, I have to tell them how much money I'm going to make?
No. So kind of what would happen. Okay. So we're going to buy you a building.
Right.
And
I love the way that sounds.
So we're going to buy you a building. We're going to kind of understand your need, what the building is going to be used for. So we kind of understand where we're going to go, what, mm-hmm. What kind of building you're looking for, those kinds of things.
Right.
We'll kind of talk a little bit about a budget. What do you think you can spend? How much money do you have for an injection into it? I would give you education about SBA lending or conventional
I know
lending.
They're out of money right now.
So, we would talk about those things.
Right.
I don't know how my colleagues do it, but this is how I do mm-hmm. it. Just to kind of get a general idea. Let's say you think, you know what, I think I can do $1 million. I would let you know if that's realistic or not realistic and kind of what the expectations are. So we'll look at a few places. You say, and of course I'm condensing all of this for time.
And of course I'll fall in love with something that's outside of my budget, and you'll try to talk me out of it, and then I'll overextend myself.
But then I'll be really creative and help you get into it, because then you'll become a landlord. And it's just so these are the conversations that help. Because there are things that you may not have known or you may not have thought of, which is why it's always great to have a broker.
I didn't think about having to provide like P&Ls to get a spot. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, so Angela is not buying the property. Either your entity or a new LC is.
Yeah, it's business at a distance.
Exactly. So what happens is that's what's provided to the lender, making sure that the income that's produced through BaaD can support the building. Now, let's say that there's a tenant. So let's say we find a building that has a tenant in there that has a good, solid lease. That income from that tenant is also included to make sure that you can cover the bills, the mortgage for the building, mm-hmm. which is why in commercial you don't traditionally get pre-approved, because it's based on the asset. It's not based on the person. And I'm talking with my hands as if like everybody can see.
Well,
me,
you're on camera twice, so but that's how I use my hands all the time. That's why I'm like, I got my nails done. See, it's
so I know. So there are times where I will have to say to somebody, on a tenant side, I don't necessarily need to see your financials right now to help you, but when we find a location, a landlord is going to need this.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing it long enough where my gut kind of tells me if there could be a problem or not. So there are times where I'll say, what is your thought process? Because somebody may not know, and I'm okay hand-holding them through the whole process. And they may not be ready now. It may take a year, but at least I will be with them to kind of walk them through that whole process.
This is the thing that I always thought it was funny is that I watch buildings. I'm like, that's a cursed building. Every restaurant that's moved into that thing has closed up. And for the life of me, I can't figure out why more restaurants want to move in there if there's been 10 through there and they've all failed miserably. And then there's a location like 2 doors down that's killing it, and you're just like, why? You know what I mean? Like, what goes into whether or not a business is successful?
You know what? This is really good. I was showing a space the other day near your house. And the owner came in from out of town, and we were sitting in the space. She was sitting in the floor, I was sitting in a chair, and I think we hung out for about an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, even though we've been talking on the phone, it was the first time we'd actually met live.
Make sure you get
And
that right there.
and she said, is it okay? I like to sit and feel it out.
No, you're great. Yeah.
And I said, no, she said to
okay.
me, I like to sit and feel it out as we're sitting in this space and we're starting to sweat because there's no air on. And I said, you know what? That's okay. I do that all the time because I want to see you go, you know what? I can see myself being successful in this space. I want to make sure that I'm setting you up for success because your success is also my success.
Right.
I don't want you going out of business. That doesn't look good for me either.
Okay, so that's a reflection on you. You're not going to put somebody in a space that's not
right.
So
we sat there, and even though we're kind of looking at other locations, she keeps coming back to that location. And so I'll do that with everybody. And sometimes it's also budget dependent. Somebody may absolutely have to have a space, and they may have a certain budget, and we have to work within that framework.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, have you talked to people out of locations? Because you're like, listen, you are a shop like this. This area is not going to produce for you.
Yes. Years ago, I remember, and this always stuck with me, we were pretty much at a lease, and both me and my broker at the time felt, you know what, don't do it.
You just felt
we wouldn't get paid, but we were like, don't do it. We feel like we know things that's going to happen with this property. We don't think you should move forward.
What kind of things were you thinking of, like piping and or like?
Not things with the building, just things with ownership. We were kind of seeing, little whispers in our community.
Right.
And we advised her not to go through with it, and she went through with it anyway.
Did it turn out bad?
It turned out
I'm
bad.
So
So I would rather end with a hug or a handshake or thank you than to put you in a spot that I don't think you either can afford, that you can be successful, or anything like that. The relationship to me is much more important.
And that's a beautiful place, because this is where we're going to kind of wrap up a little bit. Can you believe it?
I don't want to end. This is so fun.
So this is where you get to give the audience all your contact information.
So Melanie Kayeleh,
Mm-hmm.
Kayaleh. My phone number is 407-782-1989. And my email address is Melanie, MELANIE @choicecommercialgroup.com.
And coming soon, MelanieCRE.com. And I haven't even told you this one, but that's going to be done this week.
I was going to say I may be having a new email soon, but yes, you just blurted it out.
I let the cat out of the bag. So Melanie's going to have a new LinkedIn business page as well as her new website, which is MelanieCRE.com. So that is coming very, very, very soon.
Excited.
All right. Thanks for being on. And you're definitely going to be on the show again.
Absolutely. Love it. Thank you.
All right. We'll be back for another full hour of BaaD Radio.